Born into a Greek family in 1816, Bourbaki was educated at the esteemed École Spéciale Militaire, which was France's most prestigious military academy. After 35 years' worth of working his way through the ranks, he became a division commander in 1857, and then a military governor in Lyon 2 years later. In 1862, he was proposed as a candidate for the vacant Greek throne, but opted to decline the honor. He served on the French army and was placed on reserve in 1879. Later in 1935, Bourbaki began restructuring the fundamental concepts of mathematics. Bourbaki then continued to revise and write new material, expanding and improving upon these fundamental concepts, which he continues to do today. Wait, how is this possible, and what does it have to do with math? General Charles Denis Bourbaki is not the same mathematically minded Bourbaki who began publishing in 1935. Nicolas Bourbaki is a collective pseudonym for a handful of young 20th century mathematicians who created a legendary enterprise that changed mathematics. The original group consisted of Henri Cartan, Claude Chevalier, Jean Coulomb, Jean Delsart, Jean Dieudonné, Charles Irisman, René de Pucelle, Solem Mandelbrot, and André Weil. On May 6, 1906, André Abraham Weil was born to Bernard and Selma Weil in Paris, France. He fell in love with mathematics at an early age, and he writes that by the age of 10, he was passionately addicted to it.
Once when I took a painful fall, my sister Simone could think of nothing for it but to run and fetch my algebra book to comfort me. André Weil.
Weil excelled in mathematics and studied in multiple countries. He earned his doctorate in 1928 at the age of 22. Weil served as the de facto leader of the Bourbaki group and made substantial contributions to it. One of the most important was the discovery of profound connections between algebraic geometry and number theory. Beyond mathematics, Weil held lifelong interests in classical Greek and Latin literature and even taught himself Sanskrit. Henri Cartan and André Weil became friends when they attended school together. Later, the two friends each became instructors at the University of Strasbourg. In 1935, Weil and Cartan began to gather with other mathematics instructors from nearby institutions out of a growing frustration of the non-cohesive methods of education found in their field. The purpose of these meetings was to write a textbook that restructured the fundamental concepts of mathematical analysis with an emphasis on rigor and thoroughness.
They went out of their way to make them as general as possible. So every theorem was polished and improved until it was as general as they could possibly make it. And what that leaves behind are these texts that have the most general version of everything. So if you're looking for a reference that will have a general version of a theorem, it'll probably be in Bourbaki if they covered that area. At the same time, of course, over time, texts become older, new developments are made that simply weren't around when the original texts were made. So in that sense, the Bourbaki texts will become more and more classics. They won't have the state of the art. But the approach that they pioneered was extremely influential and did shift the direction of mathematical writing, probably, I would say, for at least the next 30 or 40 years.
Cartan describes the group's operations.
We often disagreed. We often had big arguments, but we remained good friends. For each subject, a redactor was appointed. Later, his redaction was read aloud and thoroughly examined. For each chapter, there could be up to 9 redactions. But in the end, everybody was tired. Dieudonné would say, "It is finished now. I shall write the last redaction," which he did. And eventually, although it seemed impossible to reach a complete agreement, there was an agreement. But it took time. It's perhaps not the best ways in terms of teamwork, but that was the way we took.
I think that you can't separate the writing style from the overall work. The goal of the work was to be very formal, very axiomatic, to start from first principles and develop everything very rigorously. And the writing style was chosen exactly to do that. So there's very little commentary. There are very few to no examples. There are no diagrams. They simply present, here's a definition, here's a theorem, here's a proof. It's up to the reader to draw whatever conclusions they want about what is the meaning. It's up to the reader to create examples if they'd like to see some examples of the definitions. The authors simply present, here it is, right? You can learn from it. And that completely matches the goal they had of creating this reference text.
Occasionally, there were individuals who were brought in to attend the Bourbaki group's meetings. These guests typically saw the whole affair as hectic and irrational. Jean Dieudonné wrote on the singular impact that witnessing a Bourbaki Congress had upon others.
Certain foreigners, invited as spectators to Bourbaki meetings, always come out with the impression that it is a gathering of madmen. They could not imagine how these people, shouting, sometimes 3 or 4 at the same time, could ever come up with something intelligent.
Bourbaki published their first volume in 1939, a summary of results on set theory entitled Théorie des Ensembles. They carried on with their pattern of revising and writing, producing 5 more volumes, collectively referred to as the Fundamental Structures of Analysis. These works are characterized by a simplistic, dry beauty in connecting various mathematical topics. The straightforward writing style found throughout the series was heavily influenced by Dieudonné. The volumes start at the beginning of mathematics and build upon the fundamental guidelines established in each preceding book, supporting every newly introduced principle with complete proofs. Bourbaki has found longevity due not only to the wide-reaching impact of their work, but also their policy that members must retire at the age of 50. This served as a reason to regularly invite younger, talented mathematicians to the regular meetings as candidates. The Bourbaki group continues to write and publish, though most of their recent works are additional chapters to earlier books. A 10th chapter of Commutative Algebra was published in 1998, and then an expanded Chapter 8 of Algebraic in 2012. Then in 2016, the first 4 chapters of a completely new book were released, centering on algebraic topology. This new work, though written by none of the original members, still possesses the same approach and tone used by Weil and his peers. That groundbreaking group of mathematicians that began in the 1920s at l'École Normale Supérieure in Paris is still a relevant force in the field today.